My stepfather kicked me out on my 18th birthday. I've taken care of you long enough, he said. You need to grow up, my mom added. So I left. But the next day, I found out I am the owner of the house, so I took my revenge. What's up, Reddit? I'm Josh, 19 now, studying computer engineering at a state college in Arizona. Never thought I'd be sharing my life story on here, but after everything that went down these past few months, I figured someone might learn something from my experience. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one. I grew up in what I'd call a middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix. Those cookie-cutter subdivisions where all the houses kind of look the same, but have enough differences so you don't accidentally walk into your neighbor's place. Our house was a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath with a decent backyard and a garage my dad converted into a workshop. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Speaking of my dad, he was the best guy I knew. Worked as an electrical engineer at a local aerospace company, coached my little league team, taught me how to build my first computer when I was 8. He wasn't perfect. Dude could not cook to save his life and had this weird obsession with 80s metal bands, but he was always there for me. Until he wasn't. Dad died of a massive heart attack when I was 10. He was only 38. No warning signs, no family history, just bam. Gone. One day we're playing catch in the backyard. The next day, mom's telling me he's never coming home. That kind of shit changes you, especially when you're a kid. After dad died, it was just me and my mom Karen for about 2 years. She was okay, I guess. Worked as an office manager at a dental practice. Made around $55,000 a year. We weren't rich, but dad's life insurance and his company benefits kept us comfortable. Mom wasn't particularly warm or affectionate even before dad died, but afterward, she got colder. Like she resented having to raise me alone or something. Then Greg entered the picture. Mom met him at some networking event for local businesses. He claimed to be an entrepreneur with multiple business ventures and investment opportunities. Red flags everywhere, right? But mom couldn't see it, or didn't want to see it. They dated for a whopping 6 months before getting married. I was 13 at the time, awkward as hell, and definitely not thrilled about this random dude suddenly becoming my new dad. Greg moved into our house with his daughter Amber, 15 at the time, 2 years older than me. From day one, she was a total nightmare. Stealing my stuff, eating my food, leaving messes everywhere and blaming me, using my computer without permission, and downloading viruses. And of course, mom and Greg always took her side. Josh, don't be so sensitive. Josh, you need to share with your sister. Josh, stop exaggerating. Josh, you need to be more understanding. It was like a broken record. Meanwhile, Amber would smirk at me behind their backs, knowing she could get away with anything. Greg was worse in different ways. He drove a leased BMW he could barely afford. I later found out he was always behind on payments, wore fake designer clothes, and loved to brag about his connections and deals in the works that somehow never materialized. He'd come home with expensive electronics or watches, show them off for a few weeks, then they'd mysteriously disappear when he couldn't make the credit card payments. He was also lazy as hell. Mom would leave for work at 7:30 a.m., and Greg would sleep till noon. He claimed to be working from home, but that mostly involved watching ESPN and making the occasional business call. That was usually just him trying to rope some other poor sucker into one of his pyramid schemes. By the time I was 14, I realized no one in that house was looking out for me, so I started looking out for myself. I studied hard, kept my head down, and got a part-time job at a local computer repair shop when I turned 15. The owner, Mr. Patel, was an awesome dude who actually taught me useful skills. I started at $10 an hour just cleaning the shop and doing basic inventory, but as I learned more, I got bumps to $12, then $15 an hour for actual repair work. I saved almost everything I earned. I had this old ammo box that used to be my grandpa's, where I kept my cash, hidden in the crawl space above my closet where Amber couldn't find it. By the time I graduated high school, I had nearly $8,000 saved up. Not a fortune, but it was my money that I earned. I also had a small group of tight friends. Mike, Derek, and Tyler. We were the kind of nerdy guys who built gaming PCs and played D&D on weekends instead of going to parties. Mike's home situation was pretty cool. His parents were both teachers and super chill. Derek lived with his mom who worked nights as a nurse, so his place was often empty. Tyler had the strictest parents, but they at least respected him. All three of them knew my home life sucked, but I tried not to complain too much. Fast forward to my 18th birthday last October 22nd. It was a Thursday, which meant I had my programming fundamentals class at community college in the morning. I was doing dual enrollment my senior year, then regular high school classes, then a shift at the computer shop. Nothing special planned. My friends had mentioned maybe grabbing pizza that weekend to celebrate, but on the actual day, I just expected to go home and chill. I got a few happy day bro texts throughout the day, a candy bar from Mr. Patel, and weirdly enough, an actual birthday card from Mrs. Rodriguez, our 70-something neighbor who'd lived next door since before I was born. She had always been nice to me, especially after Dad died. As I got off the bus that evening around 6:30 p.m., I didn't have a car. Greg had convinced Mom that buying me a car would spoil me. I was actually in a decent mood. Maybe there'd at least be a store-bought cake or something at home. Maybe Mom remembered. When I walked toward our house, I saw Greg standing on the driveway next to his precious BMW. He had my old blue duffel bag in his hand, the one Dad and I used to take on camping trips, and the most punchable smirk on his face. No hello, definitely no happy birthday. He just dropped my bag on the concrete driveway and said, "Time's up, kid. You're 18 now, which means you're not my problem anymore. Get the fuck out of my house." I stood there, completely blindsided, like my brain couldn't process what was happening. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to ask. Greg laughed. "You're an adult now. Adults don't live rent-free. Your mom and I decided it's time for you to move out and experience the real world. But this is my mom's house. Where am I supposed to go?" I stammered, still not fully grasping what was happening. "Your mom's house?" Greg's laugh got louder, meaner. "That's cute. Ask her yourself if you don't believe me." Then I heard Amber shout from her bedroom window, "Mom already knows. She's totally fine with it. You're out, loser." She was recording the whole thing on her phone, probably for her stupid TikTok, where she pretended her life was so hard. I couldn't believe what was happening. My legs felt weak, and I had this weird ringing in my ears. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my mom. She was still at work. The dental office was open late on Thursdays. She answered after 5 rings. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Greg just kicked me out. He threw my stuff on the driveway." There was this pause. Then she just said, "I know, Josh. We discussed this. You're an adult now." My heart literally felt like it stopped. "You agreed to this? To throw me out on my fucking birthday with no warning?" She sighed like I was being dramatic. "Don't use that language with me. Greg's right. You need to grow up and be a man. We've carried you long enough." Carried me? I'd been working since I was 15, buying my own clothes, paying for my own phone. I'd even given them money for rent the past year. $300 a month that Greg demanded to teach me responsibility. That was over $3,600 they'd taken from me to live in a house I'd grown up in my whole life. "It's my birthday today," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know. Consider this your chance to finally become independent. Happy birthday." Then she hung up. I stood there in shock, staring at my duffel bag with apparently all my possessions Greg had decided I could keep. I opened it up right there on the driveway. Some clothes, not even all of mine, my laptop, thankfully, some basic toiletries, and a few random books. No pictures of Dad, none of my gaming stuff, none of my tools from the workshop. "You've got 10 minutes to get anything else you absolutely need," Greg said, checking his fake Rolex. "Then I'm changing the locks." I felt numb as I walked into what had been my home my entire life. Amber was sitting on the stairs, still filming me, that stupid smirk on her face. "Aw, is little Joshy gonna cry?" she taunted. I ignored her and went straight to my room. I grabbed my backup hard drive with all my important files, the photo album with pictures of Dad and me, and reached up into the crawl space for my ammo box of savings. Then I remembered my dad's watch, the one nice thing he owned, a vintage Seiko his father had given him. It was in my desk drawer, except it wasn't. Looking for this? Amber was standing in my doorway, dangling Dad's watch. "Greg pawned it last week. Said since you were leaving anyway, you wouldn't need it." Something in me broke at that moment. I lunged at her, not to hurt her, just to grab the watch. But she jumped back, laughing. "I'm kidding. God, you're so easy to mess with. Greg sold it months ago." I don't remember much after that. I somehow made it back outside with my few possessions. Mrs. Rodriguez was watching from her porch, concern all over her face. I must have looked like a complete wreck. "Joshua," she called out, "is everything okay, mijo?" I couldn't even answer her. I just shook my head and started walking, no destination in mind. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely text Mike to ask if I could crash at his place. That night, I slept on Mike's couch, trying to make sense of how my life had imploded in the span of a few hours. Mike's family was awesome about letting me stay that first night, but their apartment was tiny, just a 2-bedroom place for Mike, his parents, and his little sister. His mom made up the couch for me with clean sheets and even gave me a new toothbrush, but I could tell this wasn't a long-term solution. The next morning, I went to school in the same clothes from the day before. I tried to act normal, but I was a mess inside. During lunch, I sat with my friends and finally broke down, telling them everything. Dude, that's fucked up, Derek said. They can't just throw you out like that. Actually, they legally can, Tyler chimed in. Tyler's dad was a paralegal, so he knew some legal stuff. Once you're 18, parents don't have any legal obligation to house you. Not helping, Ty, Mike said, shooting him a look. Sorry, just saying, Tyler mumbled. After school, I went to my shift at the computer shop. Mr. Patel took one look at me and knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked in his thick Indian accent. You look like hell warmed over. I gave him the short version. He listened without interrupting, then disappeared into his office. He came back with a protein bar and a can of Coke. Eat, he said. Then we talk. After my shift, Mr. Patel offered to let me stay in the storage room at the shop temporarily. There's a cot in there from when my nephew worked here, he said. Not comfortable, but better than street. I was so grateful I almost cried again. But as I was trying to thank him, I remembered something, or rather, someone I hadn't thought of yet. My dad's brother, Uncle Steve. We weren't super close. He lived about 40 miles away in Tempe and worked crazy hours as a construction foreman. But he'd always been decent to me, sending birthday cards with $50 and occasionally checking in. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. Greg always made excuses when Uncle Steve wanted to visit, probably because he knew Uncle Steve could see right through his BS. I thanked Mr. Patel, but told him I wanted to try one more thing before taking him up on his offer. I went to McDonald's to use their free Wi-Fi, my phone plan had limited data, and called Uncle Steve. I half expected to get voicemail given it was around 6 p.m. and he was probably still at a job site. Instead, he picked up on the second ring. Josh, everything okay? He could probably hear in my voice that something was wrong. I tried to sound casual but broke down about 10 seconds in. I told him everything. Being kicked out, my mom's reaction, even Dad's watch being sold. There was silence for a moment. Then he said, text me your location. I'm coming to get you right now. An hour later, his dusty F-150 pulled up outside McDonald's. He took one look at me with my duffel bag and his face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. Get in, he said. But first, I'm making a call. I climbed into his truck and watched as he called my mom on speakerphone. Karen, it's Steve. I've got Josh with me. He tells me Greg kicked him out yesterday and you went along with it. What the hell is going on? My mom's voice came through, defensive and irritated. This is between me, Greg, and Josh. It's not your business, Steve. Uncle Steve laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not my business? My brother's son is homeless on his 18th birthday, and it's not my business? Let me tell you something, Karen. You're going to regret this. Mark my words. Is that a threat? She snapped. No, it's a promise, he said calmly. You and that leech you married have no idea what's coming. I hope that house is worth losing your son over. He hung up and turned to me. Josh, there's some stuff you need to know about that house. But first, let's get you settled at my place. Uncle Steve's house wasn't fancy. A 3-bedroom ranch-style home he'd mostly renovated himself. He lived there with his wife Diane, a nurse, and their son Connor, who was 14 and obsessed with basketball. They immediately cleared out their home office for me and treated me like family, not some burden. That night, after dinner, real home-cooked food, not the takeout my mom and Greg always got, Uncle Steve sat me down with a Coke. I'd never seen him look so serious. Josh, did you know your grandfather owned that house free and clear? And that when he died, he left it specifically to you? I nearly choked on my soda. What are you talking about? That house is Mom's, isn't it? Uncle Steve shook his head. Your grandfather, my and your dad's father, bought that house back in the 90s for about $120,000. When he got sick, he updated his will. He left cash to your dad and me, but the house was specifically left to you, his only grandchild. He got up and went to his desk, pulling out a folder with yellowed papers. Here's a copy of the will. I kept one because I never fully trusted your mom, especially after she rushed to marry that con artist, Greg. I read through the legal language, my hands shaking again, but for a different reason. There it was in black and white. To my grandson, Joshua Allen Mitchell, I leave my primary residence at 1422 Oakwood Drive. But how? I stammered. How could they live there if it's mine? You were 11 when Grandpa died, Uncle Steve explained. Too young to own property. The will specified that your parents would act as trustees until you turned 18. When your dad died a year later, your mom became the sole trustee. She was supposed to transfer everything to you on your 18th birthday. My mind was spinning. Instead, they kicked me out of my own house? Uncle Steve nodded grimly. That's not all. I bet they've been renting out the basement apartment for cash and pocketing the money that was supposed to go into a trust for you. He was right. About 2 years after Greg moved in, they had renovated the basement into a separate apartment and had been renting it to a college student named Dylan for $900 a month. I always thought it was their house, their money. So what do we do? I asked, anger replacing the shock. First, we document everything, Uncle Steve said. Then we talk to my friend Eric. He's the best real estate attorney in the state. Just then, Aunt Diane came in with a small chocolate cake with a single candle. I know it's a day late, but everyone deserves a birthday cake, she said with a warm smile. It was such a simple thing, but I had to fight back tears. My own mother couldn't be bothered to remember my birthday, but here was my aunt making me feel like I mattered. As I blew out the candle, Connor asked, "Did you make a wish?" I nodded. "Yeah, I did." "Don't tell us what it was," Aunt Diane said, "or it won't come true." But inside, I knew exactly what I'd wished for. Justice. That night, in the converted office with fresh sheets on a pull-out couch, I finally broke down. All the emotions I'd been holding back, the shock, the betrayal, the anger, the fear, came rushing out. I buried my face in the pillow so no one would hear me sobbing like a little kid. I cried for the home I'd lost, for my dad who wasn't there to protect me, for the years of putting up with Greg and Amber's bullshit, and for my mom choosing them over me. I cried until I had nothing left, then fell into an exhausted sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Connor shooting hoops in the driveway. For a moment, I forgot everything that had happened. Then it all came rushing back. But something was different. The despair from yesterday had been replaced by something stronger. Determination. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to fight back. At breakfast, Uncle Steve laid out the plan. "I called Eric last night after you went to bed. He can see us at 11. In the meantime, I want you to write down everything you can remember about the basement apartment, when they renovated it, how much they've been charging for rent, everything." "I can do better than that," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got texts from Greg about the rent payments." Uncle Steve grinned. "That's my nephew. Always thinking ahead." Uncle Steve's attorney friend, Eric Goldstein, worked out of a converted Victorian house downtown. His office was on the second floor, with dark wood paneling and books everywhere. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with a neat beard and glasses that made him look like a college professor. He listened carefully as I explained everything, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Uncle Steve filled in some details about my grandfather and the will. When we finished, Eric leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the pad. "Based on these documents," he said, "the house is unquestionably yours, Josh. Your mother had a fiduciary duty to transfer the property to you when you turned 18. Not only did she fail to do that, but she and her husband illegally evicted you from your own property." "So I can just go back and kick them out?" I asked. Eric smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "We could do that. Or we could build a stronger case and really make them pay for what they've done." He explained that if we could prove they had been collecting rental income from the property without putting it in trust for me, we could sue for misappropriation of funds. Plus, the illegal eviction of a minor, since I was kicked out at 6:30 p.m. on my birthday, when I was technically still 17 according to my birth certificate, which showed I was born at 9:17 p.m., opened them up to additional legal problems. "Here's what we're going to do," Eric said, leaning forward. "First, we need to establish a paper trail. Josh, you mentioned texts about the rental income?" I scrolled through my phone and found several messages from Greg over the past year. "Remind Dylan rent's due tomorrow. $900 cash only. Dylan's late again with the rent. Tell him to pay up or find a new place. Got the $900 from Dylan. Gonna use it for the boat payment." Eric's eyebrows shot up at the last one. "Greg has a boat?" "A small pontoon boat he bought last summer," I explained. "Said it was an investment opportunity for lake tours or something. He used it like twice, then kept it parked in our driveway." "Perfect," Eric said, making more notes. "Now we need to get statements from witnesses. Your friend Mike who took you in that first night, the tenant Dylan, maybe some neighbors who saw you being kicked out. Mrs. Rodriguez was outside when it happened," I remembered. "And I think she called my mom about it." "Excellent. Here's my plan. I'll file an emergency petition with the court to establish your ownership rights and get a temporary restraining order against your mother and Greg to prevent them from selling or further encumbering the property. Then we'll build our case for financial restitution." For the next 2 weeks, we gathered evidence and statements. Mike and his parents gave sworn statements about how I showed up at their door with just a duffel bag. Tyler's dad helped us navigate some of the paperwork since he knew the court system. We even got in touch with Dylan, the basement tenant. He was a community college student, about 22, who had no idea about the ownership situation. When he heard what happened, he was horrified. Dude, that's so messed up, he told me when we met at a Starbucks near campus. I had no clue it was your house. Greg always acted like he was doing me a favor by renting to me. Dylan gave us copies of all his rental agreements and payment records, $900 a month for nearly 3 years, over $32,000 that should have gone to me. He also told us that Greg had recently demanded cash only for the payments, which Eric said was a huge red flag. He's trying to hide the income, Eric explained. This just gets better and better for our case. Mrs. Rodriguez, our elderly neighbor, was perhaps the most valuable witness. She had seen the whole thing from her front porch and had even taken a picture with her phone because she thought something didn't look right. I saw that awful man throw your bag out, she told me, her accent thick but her memory crystal clear. I wanted to help, but I didn't know what to do. I called your mother, but she never called back. I've been worried sick about you, mijo. The picture she had taken clearly showed Greg standing over me with my duffel bag on the ground and a timestamp of 6:30 p.m. on October 22nd, proof that I was still legally a minor when they kicked me out. Eric also requested a title search on the house and discovered something shocking. Greg had taken out a home equity line of credit for $60,000 just 6 months after marrying my mom. They had no legal right to do this, since the house wasn't theirs to borrow against. This is fraud, Eric said bluntly when he showed us the documents. They forged documents to secure that loan. The bank should have caught this, but they probably just saw that your mom was living there and assumed she owned it. By mid-November, we were ready. Eric filed papers with the court and sent official notices to my mom and Greg. The judge assigned to our case, Judge Martinez, granted an emergency hearing based on the evidence of the illegal eviction of a minor. Now we wait, Eric said, but not for long. 3 days after the legal notices were delivered, my phone exploded with texts and calls from my mom. I ignored them all, following Eric's advice. Then came the threats from Greg. You ungrateful little shit, after all we've done for you. I blocked his number. Amber, my stepsister, even got in on the action, posting on Instagram about how I was trying to steal their house and what a psycho I was. My actual friends knew better and supported me, but it still hurt to see the lies. A week later, we had our first court hearing. I wore a suit Uncle Steve helped me buy, while my mom showed up in an expensive dress I knew she couldn't afford. Greg wore his fake Rolex and a smug expression that faltered when our attorney presented the evidence. Your Honor, Eric said, not only did the defendants fail to transfer the property as required by the will, they illegally evicted the rightful owner, who was still a minor at the time of eviction, and have been collecting rental income without accounting for those funds. My mom's attorney, a nervous-looking guy who kept dropping his papers, tried to argue that they had used the rental income for my benefit, for food, clothing, and other expenses. Eric was ready for this. We have receipts showing that Josh purchased his own clothes, paid for his own phone, and even paid $300 monthly rent to the defendants, essentially paying them to live in a house he already owned. The judge's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. By the end of the hearing, she issued a temporary order. My mom and Greg couldn't collect any more rent from Dylan, couldn't make any changes to the property, and had to provide full financial records within 30 days. Outside the courthouse, my mom tried to approach me. Josh, please, you have to understand. We were just trying to prepare you for the real world. I looked her straight in the eye. The real world? In the real world, people who steal and lie go to jail. Consider this your preparation. Greg started toward me, fists clenched, but Uncle Steve stepped between us. Not a smart move, he warned. Greg backed down immediately. Uncle Steve had 4 inches and 50 pounds of muscle on him. As they walked away, I felt a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Over the next month, more ugly truths came to light. The financial discovery process revealed that my mom and Greg had not only taken out that $60,000 home equity line of credit, but had maxed it out. The money had gone toward Greg's failed business ventures, vacations to Cancun, and the BMW payments. Eric was beyond furious. This is textbook fraud, he told me. They forged documents to secure that loan. We're adding this to our complaint. Meanwhile, I kept focusing on school and my job at the computer repair shop, which had given me more hours. Uncle Steve and Aunt Diane insisted I stay with them rent-free until everything was resolved. Family doesn't charge family, Uncle Steve said simply when I offered to pay something. Connor was actually pretty cool about having his cousin suddenly living with them. He even cleared out half his closet for my clothes and invited me to play basketball with his friends on weekends. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was better than I expected. The case moved surprisingly quickly once the loan fraud was discovered. In early December, we had another hearing where the judge appointed a receiver to take control of the property and finances until a final ruling. That's when things really hit the fan. The receiver discovered that Greg had also taken out a second mortgage for $25,000 just a week after they kicked me out. That money had already disappeared, mostly into online gambling sites. Greg lost it in court when this came up, screaming about how he had rights and calling me every name in the book. The judge had him removed and held in contempt. As Christmas approached, I got an unexpected visitor at Uncle Steve's house. It was Dylan, the basement tenant, looking nervous. "Your mom and Greg told me I have to pay them in cash from now on," he said. "They said if I told anyone, they'd evict me immediately." We immediately reported this to Eric and the receiver. The judge issued a restraining order, barring my mom and Greg from even entering the property without court permission. By this point, news of our case had spread through the neighborhood and my old high school. People I barely knew were messaging me with stories about Greg's scams and my mom's lies. Former friends of my mom came forward with texts where she had bragged about living the good life on Josh's inheritance. One of my dad's old coworkers even reached out to tell me that Greg had tried to sell him investment opportunities, using my dad's name as a reference, right after my dad died. The guy had seen through it and cut contact, but he felt I should know. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Christmas with Uncle Steve's family was nothing like the tense, materialistic holidays with Mom and Greg. We got a real tree, made homemade ornaments with Connor, and exchanged modest but thoughtful gifts. Aunt Diane made tamales from scratch using her grandmother's recipe, and Uncle Steve took us to volunteer at a local shelter on Christmas Eve. For New Year's, my friends came over for a gaming night. As the clock struck midnight and we all shouted, "Happy New Year!" I realized something. I was actually happy. Despite everything that had happened, I had people who genuinely cared about me. The final hearing was set for January 15th, almost exactly 3 months after they had kicked me out. In the weeks leading up to it, my mom launched a desperate campaign to get me to drop the case. She sent tearful voicemails about how Greg had manipulated her. She even showed up at my job, causing such a scene that Mr. Patel had to call security. She tried to ambush me after class at college, begging for just 5 minutes to explain. Greg tried a different approach. He had his brother, who turned out to be a low-level weed dealer, not the investment banker Greg had always claimed, approach me outside school with an offer, $10,000 cash to drop everything. I recorded the conversation and added it to our evidence. Amber kept up her social media campaign, posting edited screenshots of conversations and claiming I was trying to destroy the family out of jealousy. She even started a GoFundMe claiming they were about to be homeless because of me, though it only raised about $200 from gullible strangers. Through it all, I stayed focused on school and work. My grades were better than ever now that I wasn't living in a toxic environment. Mr. Patel offered me a promotion to assistant manager once I got my associate's degree. I was even thinking about applying to Arizona State for their computer science program in the fall. The day before the final hearing, Uncle Steve sat me down for a talk. "Josh, I want you to be prepared for tomorrow," he said. "No matter what the judge decides, you've already won. You stood up for yourself, you discovered the truth, and you've built a new life. I'm proud of you, and your dad would be too." I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "I know. I just want it to be over." "It will be," he promised, "one way or another." The next morning, as we got ready to leave for court, I found Aunt Diane putting together a small package. "What's that?" I asked. She smiled. "Just a little something for after. Win or lose, we're celebrating you today." On the drive to the courthouse, Uncle Steve was unusually quiet. Finally, he said, "Whatever happens in there, remember that you have a home with us for as long as you need it. No rush, no pressure. Your family." I nodded, too nervous to speak, but inside I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years, the security of knowing I truly belonged somewhere. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Mike, Derek, and Tyler were there, along with Mr. Patel, Mrs. Rodriguez, and even Dylan. In the front row sat my mom, Greg, and Amber, all dressed like they were going to church. Judge Martinez called the court to order. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She began by summarizing the case. "This court has reviewed extensive evidence regarding the ownership of the property at 1422 Oakwood Drive, the actions of the trustees Karen and Gregory Lawson, and the circumstances surrounding the eviction of Joshua Mitchell on October 22nd of last year." She paused, looking directly at my mom and Greg over her glasses. "The evidence of financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty in this case is some of the most egregious this court has seen. Not only did the trustees fail to transfer the property, as required by the will of Harold Mitchell, but they actively worked to conceal the rightful ownership from the beneficiary, misappropriated rental income, fraudulently encumbered the property, and then evicted the rightful owner while he was still a legal minor. My mom was already crying. Greg sat stone-faced. Amber was furiously texting, probably updating her followers. Therefore, this court rules as follows, Judge Martinez continued. Full and clear title to the property at 1422 Oakwood Drive is hereby transferred to Joshua Allen Mitchell, effective immediately. All liens and encumbrances placed on the property by the defendants are deemed fraudulent and void. I felt a hand on my shoulder, Uncle Steve, giving me a supportive squeeze. Furthermore, the judge went on, the defendants Karen and Gregory Lawson are ordered to pay restitution to Joshua Mitchell in the amount of $57,400, representing the misappropriated rental income and illegal rent payments collected from the plaintiff. She wasn't done. The court also awards punitive damages of $25,000 for the illegal eviction of a minor. And finally, this court is referring the evidence of loan fraud to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. The gavel came down with a bang that seemed to echo through the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, my mom burst into tears, rushing toward me. "Josh, please, we have nowhere to go! I'm still your mother!" I stopped and looked at her. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "You stopped being my mother the moment you chose him over me," I said quietly. "You threw me out of my house on my birthday without a second thought. Now you know how it feels." Greg tried to get tough one last time. "You think you've won? This isn't over, you little—" Eric cut him off. "Actually, it is over. And every word out of your mouth just increases the likelihood of criminal charges. I suggest you stop talking." 3 days later, I stood on the front lawn of my house, watching as sheriff's deputies supervised my mom and Greg loading their belongings into a U-Haul. Amber was crying dramatically while recording herself for social media about being homeless. She was moving in with her actual mom, who had a nice condo downtown. My mom made one final plea as she carried out her last box. "Josh, you can't do this to your own mother. Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at her calmly. "You should have thought about that before you kicked out your son. I was wondering the same thing 3 months ago." As they drove away, Uncle Steve put his hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. For the first time in a long time, I actually am." That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom in my house. I decided to keep renting the basement to Dylan at a fair price. I used some of the damages money to fix up the place, repairs that Greg had been putting off for years. I also set up a small scholarship at my old high school in my grandfather's name. It wasn't much, $1,000 a year, but it would help someone who needed it. As for my mom and Greg, last I heard they were living in a crappy apartment on the edge of town. Greg's facing charges for the loan fraud, and my mom's dental office fired her when they found out about the whole situation. Sometimes I feel a twinge of guilt, but then I remember standing on that driveway with nothing but a duffel bag on my birthday. I remember my mom's cold voice saying, "You need to grow up," before hanging up on me. And I remember that they did this to themselves. The house is mine. It always was. And now, finally, so is my life. So, Reddit, was I the asshole for taking back what was legally mine and leaving my mom and stepdad with nothing? Honestly, I don't really care either way. Some lessons need to be taught the hard way. Edit. Holy shit. This blew up overnight. Thanks for all the awards and support. For those asking, yes, Greg is actually facing trial for the loan fraud next month. I'll update when I know more. Edit 2. A lot of people are asking about my future plans. I'm going to finish my degree, keep working part-time, and eventually I might sell the house to buy something that doesn't have so many bad memories attached to it. But for now, it feels good to sleep under my own roof that nobody can take from me.